Hey, one of the questions I get asked the most is what kind of browns can I put and how do I collect them? So this handy Rubbermaid watertight bin is what I use. When you're selecting your bin, it's really important to remember that water is going to go in and soak these before you put them into your compost bin. So don't get overly zealous with how big it is, because you're going to have to be able to lift it up full of water. So we put all kinds of things in our bin. Again, your bin, your rules. Tissue box, all kinds of paper from my favorite frozen pizzas, junk mail. This stuff's all going to get torn up a little bit, and we'll go over that in a minute. Watch out for this. Window envelopes. So yes, the paper part of the envelope can go in, but the plastic part can't. So you can do one of two things. You can either do what I've just done here and pull, use part of the envelope, or you can just put the whole thing in the recycle bin. Your choice. Magazines, toilet paper rolls, cookies, you name it, it can go in here. If it's made out of paper, it can go in. Now we have our bin. We have things torn up into the size of pieces that we would like in our bin. Time to add water. I like using these kinds of implements to water the garden and deal with the compost. It adds the water pretty evenly, getting everything wet. We're going to fill this up, run the water in here to soak everything, and this is called pre-soaking. We're going to pre-soak everything so that the paper has a chance to absorb the water. The reason that we want to do this is it'll help put a blanket of moisture in your bin, and it'll help hold the moisture that's in your bin in. We're going to put this right on top of all of the organic plant matter that's still living, your vegetable scraps, all that kind of stuff that's already in your bin. This is going to go right on top, and it's going to provide a nice wet blanket to keep the moisture in that you've already added into your bin. The wetter this is, the happier bin's going to be. As you can see, the water level is up to where your paper level is. Everything's sitting for a little bit. You want to let it sit in here for at least a few minutes. Typically, I'll bring this out and fill this up, and I let it soak. While I'm tending the bin, I'm adding all my kitchen scraps and tossing my bin. So here's my food scrap bins that I keep in the house. Folgers containers, just like I showed you. So I'm just going to take this and dump it right on top. Everything in there just goes right on top. There's eggshells, coffee grounds, apple cores, some chips left over from a party, the crumbs of the chips, banana peels, all the things. Onions. It just all goes my layer of nitrogens. Then I'm going to take, there's always going to be some stuff that gets a little stuck in the bottom. I'm going to rinse these out and put the water in the bin to clean these out. So there you go. They're all rinsed out. They're not perfect, but they're just going to collect more greens, so that's okay. And everything's on top of the bin with all the moisture. Now we're ready to add the browns that have been soaking this whole time, and they are ready to go. This bin full of water and full of browns. Remember when I said when you're selecting this, make sure that you size it so that you're comfortable lifting it full of water. Use your knees. It's heavy. I rest it on the edge of the bin so I don't have to hold it the whole time. And now I'm just going to start taking handfuls and laying it right on top of all those greens that I just added. Make a nice big wet blanket to insulate and start creating the heat that you want in your compost bin to get that decomposition process going. And and then just pour the rest of the moisture on. I had a big bin today. You're going to stick implement in like this, turn it if you have the screw type, and pull straight up. As you can see, it's getting heavy. It's wet, it's full, and it's getting quite heavy. So you can make it a little bit easier by just screwing down a little bit and pulling up to loosen the top layers of your bin. Sometimes you'll find, especially as you get into dry spots, that it might be a little bit hard to use the screwing motion to get in there. Just keep at it, go around that spot, and as you lift and pull and loosen things around it, it'll start to improve. This is mixing your browns and your greens. It's also revealing some of the spots that may be dry as you're tossing the bin. I use the words toss, aerate interchangeably. It's the same thing. Hopefully I confuse anybody about that. Use the implement to dig in the corners, pull things out if something's lumped together. And I'm starting to get to the dry levels of the bin. The top is pretty wet. And as I'm turning it, I'm starting to see dry material coming up. So just keep adding moisture. When you encounter the dry areas, it'll start to filter down into the lower layers. That's why I like these implements, because they have an automatic off to them. You don't have to worry about wasting any water or turning the faucet on and off. Add some more water, keep aerating. If yours drips a little, like mine sometimes does, the end of it in here, so you're not wasting any of that water. The corners, I notice, tend to be the driest. So a lot of times that's where I'll start aerating, and then you have to watch where the vents are around the edges too. It tends to get more dry because it's got more access to air. Just keep pulling that up. And you'll notice as you start to pull things up, stuff below is decomposed from the stuff up above, which is part of why you want to toss the bin. And look, here's some of my worms. They're here helping. These worms I added to my bin years ago. And happy worms make more worms. If you decide to add worms to your outdoor bin, you'll never have to do it again. You don't need to buy a lot of worms. You can buy 500 worms, 1,000 worms, whatever you want. And eventually you'll end up with just the right number of worms. The population is self-regulating based on the activity in the bin, how much food is available. They will reproduce very happily. They love to use cardboard as nurseries. Here's a little clump of dry paper that's clumped together, and it's very dry. I pulled it out from over by a vent, and so I just take a minute to get some water on there, soak it up pretty good, and then I'll continue to toss the bin. It's that simple. As you start to get deeper into your bin, material is going to start to be more decomposed, which is a good thing. It's going to start getting a little heavy because it's nice and wet down there. As you get down to some of these lower levels, sometimes you'll have a wet layer on top that you just added when you opened your bin, then dry layer, and then a more moist layer on the bottom. The beneficial bacteria and a lot of critters that are down there more towards the bottom helping decompose everything, you're bringing some of that up to the top to help work on the items that you have just added. And I see not only worms, I see a beetle, I see some roly-polies. There were definitely fruit flies in here. When I opened the bin, there was actually quite a lot because I added greens onto the top of the bin a couple of times and then left it without aerating or adding moisture. Still getting a little bit of dry spots down here, but for the most part it's pretty moist, which is great. One of the things that takes a really long time to decompose that is in my bin is pine cones. These will decompose over time, but they do take a while. I use them to decorate, and instead of throwing them away or putting them in a green bin, I went ahead and compost. found a dry spot and I had some more water in here. Got quite a few worms down on these lower layers. They're pretty happy. They're happy I've been home for a month and have been tending my bin, adding things for them to eat, I'm sure. Going to find different critters as you start getting down into the layers, and I'm finding some baby worms down here. They're real small. They might not be red wigglers. Some of them look like they're not. They might be flatworms or other kinds of beneficial worms that have come into the bin from the ground to help the process. No frogs, unfortunately. I have not had my frog visitors in some time. There's a pill bug. As things start decomposing in your bin, you're not going to recognize them anymore when they get to a certain point. Another question I often get is, what if something that shouldn't be in my bin gets in there? Here's a good example. That purple thing, whatever it is, probably shouldn't be in here, but it's in here. It's probably got a plastic coating on it, which is what the purple is. It was a piece of trash from something, and it got in the bin. It's not the end of the world, folks. It happens. It happens to all of us. Window envelopes get by me. All kinds of things get by me. I do my best. Oh, here's another one. Some kind of junk mail. You know, they're always sending you the little cards, trying to get you to sign up for something. It accidentally got in here. You just pull it out. It's not a big deal. I think even the most careful composters find things in their bins that they didn't intend to put in there. Find these things. I grab them. I pull them out. Here's some binding. Probably, again, a piece of junk mail. One nice thing about putting junk mail in your compost bin, there's no security risk. A lot of people shred up their junk mail because they're worried about putting it in the recycle bin. Somebody might steal their identity. I've never heard of anybody going and shuffling through somebody's compost bin to steal their identity. Not saying it can't happen, but the odds of that happening, I would say, are a bit less. So I don't worry about my junk mail security because it all goes in the compost bin.